The video you are currently viewing is not edited or generated by a neural network. These are real events that have been documented. This 20-second video was filmed by audio engineer Alex Rivera, who read on a forum that if you install speakers at the right height and frequency in a certain hotel on the outskirts of Sedona, you can open a portal to a parallel dimension. He didn't believe it and decided to check it out for himself. This led to the demolition of the hotel and Alex going into hiding from the authorities. Alex Rivera grew up in Tempe, a suburb of Phoenix, in a family of second-generation Mexican immigrants. His father was a construction worker, and his mother was an administrator at a dental clinic. They were a typical middle-class family. From childhood, Alex was a quiet, focused child, the kind of kid who is described at school as weird but harmless. He didn't play team sports or go to parties. Instead, he would sit in his room for hours with headphones on, analyzing the sounds of his favorite albums. By the age of 16, he already knew how to work with basic DAW programs. By the age of 22, he had a small but stable portfolio, mixing tracks for local indie bands, voiceovers for commercials, and working with podcasts. By 2023, Alex was working entirely remotely. He rented a one-bedroom apartment in the western part of Phoenix in the Maryvale neighborhood, which was quiet, a little dusty, and unremarkable. His car was an old 2014 Honda Civic, dark gray metallic, with a crack in the windshield in the lower right corner that he kept meaning to fix but never got around to. In the mornings, he made instant coffee, not out of laziness, but because he said that good coffee has too much of its own opinion. He worked with headphones on until lunchtime, then went to the nearest park with his laptop, unless it was too hot. In the evenings, he read forums, first on acoustics and audio engineering. Then, starting around the spring of 2023, he increasingly visited resources dedicated to alternative sound physics, resonance frequencies, and what in certain circles is called sound field geometry. His ex-girlfriend, Natalia Serra, whom he broke up with in early 2022, would later say that even then she noticed something in him that she described as an obsession with silence. Not silence in the everyday sense, but something else. He would stop in the middle of a conversation and listen to something she couldn't hear. He would ask her to be quiet. He would explain later that there is something in the air, but we are not tuned in. He was neither paranoid nor fanatical. He was an engineer who started listening to something different from everyone else. On Saturday, September 30th, 2023, Alex left Phoenix around 8 a.m. The weather that day was typical for early October in Arizona. Clear skies, not a cloud in sight, a temperature of around 22 degrees Celsius. The air dry with a slight smell of hot dust, which in the desert takes on an almost metallic taste in the fall. He took Interstate 17 north, then exited onto State Route 179 towards Sedona. The drive took just over 2 hours. Alex listened to white noise in the car, not music, but white noise recorded in different rooms with different acoustic characteristics. It was his work habit to clear his ears before a new project. Sedona greeted him as it always greets guests, with red rocks. The city is small, with about 10,000 permanent residents, but it has a huge tourist flow. It is called the mystical city of Arizona, and this is not just a marketing slogan. Sedona is home to so-called vortexes, points where, according to many, the Earth's energy comes to the surface with particular intensity. Thousands of people come to these places every year, some for a spiritual experience, others out of curiosity, and others, like Alex, with more specific goals. The Red Rock Inn Motel was located in the southeastern part of the city, away from the main tourist flow, about 2.5 kilometers from the popular Cathedral Rock Trail. It was a long, single-story building with 22 rooms, painted beige and terracotta to match the surrounding rocks. There was a parking lot in front of the building and a small swimming pool at the end, which, judging by its appearance, had not been properly cleaned for several years. The sign above the entrance has cracked plastic letters, and one N in the word "in" has shifted slightly to the side. The place did not look abandoned, but it looked tired. It was as if it remembered something it preferred not to talk about. Alex checked in around 10:30 in the morning. He was greeted at the reception desk by the manager, an elderly man named Dennis Colefield, 63 years old, wearing a flannel shirt and speaking slowly, as if weighing each word. Alex asked for a room where it's quieter. Dennis gave him the key to room 17 without comment and said that breakfast was not included, but there was always bottled water in the refrigerator at the reception desk. Room 17 was located at the very end of the east wing of the building, the last in the row, with a single window overlooking the parking lot. Standard room, queen-size bed with gray-blue bedspread, bedside table, table by the window, armchair in the corner, bathroom with shower. The ceiling was low, about 2 meters 40 centimeters. The walls were concrete under a layer of whitewash, without wallpaper. Thick curtains, when drawn, provide almost complete darkness even during the day. Built-in air conditioner, unit by the window, humming a little louder than usual. A characteristic sound for old equipment that has not been serviced for a long time. Alex put his backpack on the bed and, before unpacking his things or going to lunch, walked around the room with his phone in his hand, using a sound field analysis app. It was his ritual before working in an unfamiliar room. He tapped the walls with his knuckles, listened to the echo, and measured the basic acoustic characteristics. When lightly tapped, the ceiling produced a characteristic hum, short, but with an after effect that he later described as if something was living inside. He went out to lunch at a cafe a mile from the motel, a turkey sandwich and a large black coffee. He returned around noon. He lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Then he opened his laptop. The idea Alex brought to Sedona was not spontaneous. It had been forming for several months, from fragments of forum discussions, popular science articles, and a couple of video lectures from a paid course on resonant acoustics that he had bought in the spring. The essence boiled down to the following. According to a number of alternative theories, certain sound frequencies have an effect on physical matter and biological systems that goes beyond the scope of classical acoustics. The frequency of 528 Hz is referred to in these circles as the DNA frequency. It is claimed that it can influence the molecular structures of living organisms. 525 Hz is considered its harmonic relative. When two close frequencies are played simultaneously, a so-called beat occurs, a difference frequency that the brain perceives as a separate tone. In this case, the difference was 3 Hz. 3 Hz is the infrasonic range, at the edge of audibility. Sounds in this range are not directly perceived by the human ear, but the body senses them as vibrations. Some industrial installations operate in the infrasonic range, which can cause discomfort, nausea, anxiety, and, in a number of documented cases, hallucinations in humans. Alex knew this. He was no novice in acoustics, but he had read something else. At the forum, which he would later refer to only by its first 2 letters, WV, there was a discussion of a phenomenon that participants called standing resonance nodes in enclosed spaces. According to this concept, certain rooms, depending on their geometric proportions and wall materials, can amplify sound vibrations to levels at which anomalous visual effects occur at focal points in the space. No one has clearly explained the mechanism, but several forum participants described experiments in which they allegedly observed air distortions in the center of the room. One of them wrote a post that Alex reread several times. It's not a hallucination. It's not pressure on the eyes. The air literally behaves differently at this point. It's as if there is a different state of the environment there. Sedona was not chosen by chance. The same forums repeatedly mentioned the Red Rock Inn specifically as a place with abnormally high acoustic sensitivity. No scientific justification was given for this, but several people wrote that it was there that the effect occurs faster than in ordinary rooms. Alex did not believe in mysticism. He believed in acoustics, and he decided to check it out. The calculation was specific. The speed of sound in air at room temperature is about 343 meters per second. Dividing by the carrier frequency of 528 Hz, you get a wavelength of approximately 65 centimeters. This is not an abstraction. In a room measuring 4 meters 80 centimeters by 3 meters 60 with a height of 2 meters 40, a wave 65 centimeters long fits exactly 7 times along the long axis, 5.5 times along the short axis, and 3.5 times vertically. This means that a complex 3-dimensional lattice of antinodes, points where pressure is added up, and nodes, points where it is canceled out, appears in the volume of the room. At 2 carrier frequencies, 525 and 528 Hz, the lattices overlap with a slight phase shift. This is the number Alex wrote in his notebook: 65 centimeters, lambda for 528 Hz. The antinodes of the two waves coincide at the geometric center of the volume. This is the focal point. A beat of 3 Hz, the difference between the carrier frequencies, does not in itself create standing waves in the room. Its wavelength is about 114 meters, which is incomparable to the size of the room. But Alex relied on a different concept. 3 Hz is a psychoacoustic trigger, a modulation that the brain perceives as a separate rhythm and which, according to his calculations, synchronized with the phase pressure at the focal point. In antinodes, the pressure is added up, and in nodes, it is canceled out. The intersection point of the antinodes of both waves in the center of the room, approximately 1.5 meters from each wall, was supposed to become the focus of the entire system, according to Alex's calculations. He unpacked both JBL Charge 5 speakers, compact but with a wide enough frequency range to reproduce sinusoids in the required range. He placed one on the bed, at the headboard, pointing the diffuser toward the center of the room. He attached the second one with reinforced tape to the ventilation grill under the ceiling. The grill had enough ribbed protrusions to firmly secure the barrel-shaped body in a horizontal position. He always carried a roll of duct tape in his cable case, a professional habit that came in handy here in an unexpected way. It was a crude but reliable way to achieve vertical separation of the sources, a necessary condition for forming a 3-dimensional sound field. The speakers were connected to the laptop via Bluetooth, each playing its own frequency, the lower one at 525 Hz, the upper one at 528 Hz. The volume was set to 70% of maximum, which corresponded to approximately 88 decibels at a distance of 1 meter. Not deafening, but noticeable. At around 4:30 on the first day of October 2023, Alex pressed the play button. The first few seconds were uneventful, the room filled with a quiet, almost indistinguishable tone. Then the body began to feel a pulsation. Not hear it, but feel it. In the chest, in the ears, in the soles of the feet, through the linoleum floor. 3 Hz is slow. 3 beats per second, like a very slow heartbeat. Alex stood by the wall, looked at the center of the room, and waited. He placed his phone on a small tabletop tripod that he always carried with him and turned on the recording. In the second minute, he noticed that the air in the center of the room looked different. Not haze, that word isn't accurate, more like ripples. A slight, almost imperceptible tremor, like over hot asphalt, but without the heat. He took a step to the left. The ripple disappeared. A step to the right, it reappeared. The point was clear. About 1.5 meters from the east wall, 1.5 meters from the west wall, slightly closer to the bed than to the door. Exactly where the focus of the standing waves should have been, according to his calculations. He later wrote on the forum, "I expected a visual artifact. I didn't expect it to be so geometrically precise." In the third minute, the periphery of his vision began to flicker. It was like the aura before a migraine. Alex knew the feeling, he had migraines, but without the pain and without the gradual buildup. The edges of his field of vision just started to pulsate slightly in time with the beat. His heart rate, he said, rose sharply. He could feel it in his temples and throat. Then he found an old paper notebook with a ballpoint pen in the bedside table drawer and wrote, 3 minutes 20 seconds, pulse around 120, palm sweaty, slight dizziness, no panic. The 4th minute changed everything. The ripples in the center of the room became more noticeable. Now it was no longer a hint, but a distinct phenomenon. The boundary of the zone became clearer, approximately 40 to 45 centimeters in diameter, slightly elongated vertically. Alex described it this way. It's as if there's a lens in the air, not glass, just a different state of the medium. Everything behind it is slightly out of place. He took a step forward and entered the zone. He was only able to describe what happened next a few days later, when the initial shock had subsided somewhat. The moment he crossed the boundary of the zone, in his words, it was a fraction of a second, space contracted. Not the walls, space itself. It was as if he had stepped into a room that was both the same and different. Nausea struck instantly, sharp, like a rapid elevator ride. Then came euphoria, almost painful. He wrote, "It was as if someone had turned the very texture of the air inside out. Then, brightness." Everything in his field of vision became more intense. The bedspread was brighter. The light from behind the curtains was sharper. Even the smell of dust and old carpet became more acute. He stood at this point for several seconds, not moving. And then, according to him, he saw. Not in the room, through the ripples, or through what the ripples actually were, He saw trees. Not a picture, not a projection. Actual trees, three-dimensional, with branches moving in the wind. Deciduous, light-colored. The grass beneath them was tall, tinged with yellow. The light was different. Not like Arizona light, soft, diffused, like on a cloudy day somewhere further north. The air was moving there. He could see it in the leaves, and he could hear it through the pulsating tone of the speakers, a distant, barely discernible rustle. He took a step back. The ripples remained. The trees were gone. The room was just a room again, with a low ceiling, thick curtains, and a humming air conditioner. Alex turned off the speakers. He sat down on the bed. He looked at his phone. 12 minutes and 40 seconds had passed since the recording began. He didn't leave the room for about an hour. He sat on the floor, his back to the bed, staring at the spot where the ripples had been. Now there was nothing there, only air. Ordinary, quiet, motionless. He scrolled through the recording on his phone. The camera had captured slight vibrations in the image, characteristic of high-amplitude sound waves affecting the optics. In the center of the frame, roughly where the zone was, there was a slight distortion for 2 or 3 seconds, which could be attributed to shaky hands or a defective sensor. It could have been. There were no trees in the recording, but at some point, at the 8th minute, something flashed at the edge of the frame on the right side. Quickly, indistinctly. Alex watched this fragment several times, then he stopped. Around 7 in the evening, he left the room, just stood at the door, breathed in the fresh air, looked at the red rocks on the horizon. The sky had already darkened, and the first stars were appearing above the horizon. He returned to the room, opened his laptop, and ran the experiment again. This time, he added a reverb to the signal chain, a software plugin that simulated the effect of spatial echo by amplifying standing waves in the room. It was crude engineering, not particularly sophisticated, but it should increase the amplitude of the beats at the focal point. He hung the speaker from the ceiling again and set the volume to 70%. He pressed start. This time, the effect appeared faster, in about 2 minutes, and it was noticeably stronger. The ripples appeared in the same place, but their diameter increased to, in his estimation, 60 to 70 centimeters. The edges were clearer. The boundary between normal air and the zone became more distinct, almost tangible. Alex described it as a film that you can feel, but not lift. He did not enter the zone a second time. He stood at its edge and watched 20 minutes. Then he turned it off. The residual hum in his ears continued for about 2 more hours. He lay on the bed with his eyes closed and heard it, quiet, steady, just below the threshold of audibility, as if someone were playing a very long note somewhere far away. Then he fell asleep. At night he dreamed of a portal, not ripples, not trees, specifically a portal, as he called it in the morning. Geometrically correct, almost perfectly round, located in a space without walls or ceiling, dark at the edges, lighter toward the center. He stood in front of it and knew. He knew for sure in his dream that he just needed to take one step. He woke up at 3:40 a.m. The blanket was damp with sweat. His heart was beating steadily, but the feeling of knowledge, which had seemed absolute in his dream, was melting away with every passing second, just as dreams melt away. By 4 in the morning, only a faint memory remained. He wrote in his notebook, "Dream, portal, knew where it led. Now I don't know. It was certain. Now it's not." On the morning of October 2nd, around 8 o'clock, Alex went to the reception desk to get some water from the refrigerator. Dennis Coalfield was already there, sitting at the counter with a mug of coffee and reading the newspaper. They exchanged a few words about the weather. Then Alex, almost impulsively in his words, without understanding why, took out his phone and played the recording right there at the reception desk. He didn't show the screen, he just pressed play, and the phone speaker emitted what was on the tape. A quiet but distinct pulsating hum. Those very carrier tones, muffled and distorted by the phone microphone's matrix, but recognizable. Dennis Coalfield froze. Not immediately, after a second, as if his brain didn't believe what it had heard at first. The coffee mug in his hand trembled slightly. He uttered one word, "Turn it off." Alex turned it off. He asked why. Dennis was silent for a long time. He wasn't looking at Alex. Somewhere over his shoulder, toward the east wing. Then he said, slowly, weighing each word like a man who gives the minimum to get the maximum effect, "There was a guy from Los Angeles in this room. In 1919, they found him unconscious in the bathroom in the morning. The police came. He came too and said something about waves tearing fabric. He didn't say anything else that made sense. We closed the room for 3 months after that. Dennis said nothing more. He said just enough to scare us and make us leave. He took his mug and went into the back room. Alex returned to the room. He sat down at the table. He opened his laptop and started writing a post on the WV forum. The post was published on October 2nd, 2023, according to the timestamp around 11 a.m. local time. Alex used the nickname he was known by on the forum, AudioNode_88. The post was simply titled, Sedona, Room 17, Report. He described the experiment in a concise and matter-of-fact manner, like a technical report. Frequencies, equipment parameters, resonance mode calculations, chronology. He described the visual effect, a zone of vibration with a diameter of about 45 centimeters at the focal point, in a single sentence. He wrote about the trees in a separate paragraph at the end, marking it, subjective experience that cannot be verified. He also wrote about the manager's words, verbatim as far as he could remember. He uploaded the video as an attachment, 12 minutes and 40 seconds, compressed to medium quality. Within the first few hours, the post had several hundred views and about 60 replies, then more. By midnight, he said, notifications were coming in every few minutes. He answered some questions and ignored others. Then he turned off the notifications and went to sleep. The next day, October 3rd, he left the motel around 9 in the morning. He paid Dennis Caulfield in cash, $120 for 2 nights. Dennis didn't look him in the eye when he paid. Alex loaded his backpack into his Honda Civic and drove toward Phoenix. On State Route 179, in the opposite direction, the WV forum shut down the day after the post was published, October 4th, 2023. The administrators gave no explanation. The post disappeared, along with the forum. The video was downloaded by several users before the closure. This became known later when individual frames appeared on other sites. The full-length recordings themselves have not been publicly available on any known resource since then. Several people who claimed to have downloaded the full version wrote that the files were corrupted when they tried to open them again. One user, under the nickname phasefield_7, posted a screenshot of 5 seconds from the middle of the recording, the part where there was distortion on the right edge of the frame. The screenshot remained on the platform for about 48 hours, then was deleted for violating community rules. Which rules exactly were not specified. This in itself proves nothing. Forums are closed. Files are damaged. Moderators delete content for a variety of reasons. But people who followed this story noticed another detail. The archive of the WV forum, which is usually stored on independent resources, such as the Wayback Machine for several days after the site is closed, was unavailable in this case. The page existed in the index, but when you tried to open it, it returned an error. Not page not found, but a server error, as if something was actively preventing it from loading. One of the forum participants, a user with the nickname resonance_watch, wrote about this on another platform. In the 8 years that I have been following this topic, this has happened 3 times. Each time, after the publication of specific technical data on acoustic anomalies in specific geolocations. Just a fact. You can interpret it however you want. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, in an apartment in the western part of the city, Alex Rivera was trying to get back to work. It didn't work. Not because he was scared or traumatized, at least not in the usual sense of the word. It was just that something had changed in how he perceived the space around him. He described it in several messages he sent to friends during October. I look at the room and think, this isn't all there is here. Not in a paranoid way, in a physical way. I now know, or think I know, that under certain conditions the environment behaves differently, and it doesn't go away. His neighbor on the same floor, Caroline Dubois, 31, a freelance translator, said later that around mid-October, Alex stopped appearing in the building's common areas. Before, he would sometimes come out into the hallway. They would say hello and occasionally talk. After returning from Sedona, she hardly saw him. Once, at the end of October, she met him by the elevator. He looked normal, was neatly dressed, but was looking somewhere else, as if he was listening to something in the wall. When she asked him, "How are you?" he replied briefly, "Everything's fine, I'm working," and he went into his apartment. His ex-girlfriend, Natalia Sarah, said that in early November, he sent her a voice message, the first contact in several months. In the message, he spoke quickly and a little incoherently. "I just want you to know that I'm okay, but if I suddenly stop responding, it's not because something bad has happened. It's just, I think someone might come after me. I don't know who, but I think people other than those on the forum saw the recording. Natalia called back, but he didn't answer. He replied with a message, "Sorry, everything's fine. Don't worry." She was worried. At the same time, in Sedona, something else was happening. The Red Rock Inn Motel closed room number 17 to guests in mid-October 2023. The official reason, according to information obtained from a former motel employee, whose name is not disclosed at his request, was technical problems with the electrical wiring in the room. But the same source reported something else. Since about the beginning of October, several guests from neighboring rooms 16 and 18, had complained about a hum. Not the noise of the air conditioner, not the sounds from the street, specifically a low, pulsating hum that can be felt in the teeth, not in the ears. One guest from room 16 demanded a room change at 3 in the morning, explaining that he couldn't sleep because of the vibration in the walls. Another guest from room 18 asked at the front desk in the morning, "Is there construction work going on nearby at night?" Dennis Caulfield said that there was no construction work. At the same time, no one was staying in room 17 at that time. The complaints continued for several weeks, with interruptions. Sometimes the hum was heard every night for several nights in a row, then disappeared for a week, then returned. Dennis Caulfield, according to the source, tried to find a technical explanation. He called an electrician, then a plumber. Neither found anything. A construction crew that inspected the foundation also found no abnormalities. The hum continued. At the end of November 2023, 2 people came to the motel. The source describes them as people in ordinary clothes, not uniforms, who talked to Dennis for about half an hour in his office. After this visit, Dennis Caulfield, according to the source, became even more silent than usual and avoided any conversation about room 17 for several days. When asked directly by one of the employees, he replied only, "That's not our concern." Who these 2 people were is unknown. No one remembered the vehicle. They apparently did not show any identification. In February 2024, the Red Rock Inn Motel received an order from the Yavapai County Building Control Department. The order, according to public records available for public request, concerned identified structural violations in the east wing of the building. The specific violations were not listed in the document. The deadline for compliance with the order was 60 days. In April 2024, the east wing of the Red Rock Inn Motel was partially demolished. The demolition affected only the 3 outer rooms of the east wing, rooms 15, 16, and 17. The rest of the building remained intact. The official reason for the demolition was non-compliance with building codes adopted in the state of Arizona. The motel's management company paid for the demolition out of its own funds. Dennis Caulfield resigned as manager that same month. The local newspaper, Sedona Red Rock News, published a short article about the demolition in its April issue. The article did not mention the complaints from guests, the story of Alex Rivera, or the visit by 2 unknown individuals in November. Just the fact of the demolition and the official reason. The article took up 3 paragraphs on page 22. Meanwhile, the story Alex posted on the forum continued to circulate, despite the deletion of the post itself and the closure of the forum. It was retold on other platforms, first in narrow thematic communities, then more widely. Several YouTube channels specializing in the paranormal created content based on it, but all of them relied exclusively on retellings, not the original source. Alex himself did not contact the authors of these materials. People appeared on forums claiming to know Alex personally or to have communicated with him, but it was not possible to verify these claims. In December 2023, one user posted on Reddit, in a subreddit dedicated to anomalous phenomena, a post titled, "I have contact with AudioNode_88. The user claimed to have communicated with Alex directly, and that Alex had confirmed that the video existed in its entirety, was stored on encrypted media, and that he had no intention of sharing it with anyone. The reason was that it was not safe. The post generated several hundred comments, lively debate, and several attempts to verify the author's identity. Verification was unsuccessful. The post still exists, unlike most of the material on this topic. Another user, from a different account, wrote something in the same discussion that went virtually unnoticed amid the rest of the traffic. He wrote, "I was at a motel in Sedona, not in October, earlier. I didn't know about this post. I didn't know about AudioNode, but in the room where I stayed, I don't know if it was number 17, I also heard a hum at night, and I dreamed of trees. The man from Los Angeles, who was found in bathroom number 17 in 2019, was named, according to available information, Cole Edwards. He was 32 years old. He came to Sedona alone and stayed at the Red Rock Inn for 3 nights. On the third morning, he did not come down for breakfast and did not respond to knocks on the door. The door was opened with a spare key. Cole Edwards was lying unconscious on the bathroom floor. His phone was on the table in the room. His belongings were untouched. The door was locked from the inside. The Sedona ambulance arrived within 9 minutes. Paramedics found no signs of intoxication, heart failure, or neurological disorders. A standard examination showed normal readings. The only anomaly, Cole Edwards, regaining consciousness in the ambulance, repeated the same phrase several times in a row, then with pauses, then again. Medical worker Marisa Javier, who was present during transport, wrote in the log, "The patient is conscious, disoriented, repeating, 'Waves are tearing the fabric, waves are tearing the fabric.'" By the time he arrived at Sedona Cole Edwards Hospital, he was completely normal in all physiological respects. He told doctors that he had just fainted and couldn't remember why. He was discharged the same day. The police filed a standard incident report with no criminal charges. The report was filed with the Yavapai County Archives. It exists. It is unknown whether anyone contacted Cole Edwards after the Alex Rivera story. It proved difficult to find contact details for a person with this name in available sources. There are several people named Cole Edwards in Los Angeles County. Which one is the person from room 17 is unknown. No media outlet has made any attempt to establish this publicly, at least, not publicly. As for Alex Rivera himself, his story has not received widespread coverage in the mainstream media. No major publication has published anything about what happened. This is not surprising in itself. The story of a freelancer from Phoenix who claims to have seen trees in another place through sound vibrations in a cheap motel is not the kind of material that makes the front pages. Nevertheless, several journalists specializing in paranormal and alternative science tried to contact Alex. According to available information, he did not respond to any of these inquiries. His professional profile on several freelance platforms was deleted, apparently by himself, in November 2023. The last paid order in his history on one of the platforms is dated September 27, 2023, 3 days before his trip to Sedona. After his return, there were no new orders. To understand how much what happened to Alex Rivera fits or does not fit into the framework of known physical phenomena, each element of his experience must be considered separately. The frequency beat of 525 and 528 Hz is a real physical phenomenon. A difference frequency of 3 Hz is not infrasound in the strict sense. Infrasound begins below 20 Hz. 3 Hz is simply a very slow beat, perceived as a pulsation. Its psychophysiological effects have been studied in the context of binaural rhythms. When different frequencies are fed to different ears through headphones, the brain hears a different tone, which can affect the state of consciousness, relaxation, concentration, drowsiness. Some studies have recorded changes in heart rhythm during this process. However, in Alex's case, the frequencies were reproduced through speakers in a closed room, a fundamentally different system. The main role here is played not by the binaural effect, but by the acoustics of the room. Standing waves in a rectangular room are a real phenomenon, well described in acoustic engineering. Zones of pressure antennas and nodes at specific points in space are real. At certain frequencies and amplitudes, they can create noticeable physiological effects: discomfort, pressure in the ears, disorientation. Visual ripples in the air at very high sound pressures are technically possible as an optical effect. Sound waves create periodic changes in the density of the medium, which, at sufficient amplitude, can refract light, analogous to the Schlieren effect used in scientific laboratories to visualize air flows. However, to achieve a visible effect, the pressure usually needs to be significantly higher than what 2 portable Bluetooth speakers can produce. Nausea, rapid heartbeat, and sweating are standard physiological responses to stress and acoustic exposure in the infrasonic range. This is easily explained. Trees are not. There is no rational explanation for this within the framework of classical acoustics and neurophysiology. Hallucinations are possible with strong exposure to the vestibular apparatus and with hyperventilation, which could have developed due to tachycardia. But hallucinations of this kind are usually amorphous, not detailed, unlike what Alex described: specific trees, specific grass, specific wind, specific light, different from that in Arizona. A residual hum in the ears for 2 hours after turning off the speakers is also unusual for acoustic systems of this power. 2 hours of residual tinnitus after 88 decibels for 20 minutes is outside the norm, unless Alex had an initial hypersensitivity of the auditory apparatus or an individual physiological peculiarity. It is impossible to verify this. He did not undergo an audiological examination either before or after. Nighttime sleep with a portal is beyond any rational analysis. Dreams after a strong emotional experience are normal, but the details of the dream described by Alex in his notebook coincide with the details he describes when reliving the experience, only brought to a logical conclusion. It is as if the brain continued the experience interrupted in reality during sleep. The version about a psychotic episode was discussed. Several commentators in various discussions suggested that what Alex described was a symptom of the onset of psychosis or an acute dissociative state. This is possible, but a psychotic episode does not usually end as clearly and as quickly as in this case. Alex left the zone and everything stopped immediately. Dissociation, as such, does not have such a clear spatial reference. It does not turn on and turn off when crossing a specific point in space. And it does not explain why the phone camera recorded distortions in the same place where Alex described the visual effect. The camera recorded it. This is the detail that is most difficult to interpret within the framework of the subjective hallucinatory experience version. There is another detail that is usually omitted in retellings of this story. When an acoustic specialist, whose name is not disclosed at the request of the source, reviewed the technical parameters of the experiment described in Alex's post and made his own calculations, he pointed out the following. Standard motel rooms with the parameters described by Alex, 4 meters 80 by 3 meters 60 with a height of 2 meters 40, concrete walls with a low absorption coefficient, have a set of resonant modes at which so-called focal pressure can occur at the geometric center of the volume. When two frequencies are reproduced whose difference falls within a range that is a multiple of the main resonance mode of the room, the total pressure at the focal point can exceed the calculated value by several times. This is a well-known acoustic effect. It is used in particular in industrial acoustic emitters and in medical ultrasound therapy systems. However, the expert added the following. Under such conditions, the impact on a biological object located at the focal point may include effects that have not yet been studied in the field of civil acoustics. He did not elaborate further, but he did say one thing. If someone wanted to study such effects systematically, they would look for places with suitable geometry and acoustic properties. Such places exist, and not all of them are documented. He did not say whether the Red Rock Inn was one of those places.